You want to get into kind of the topic I suggested?
Yes. So do you want to tell people what it is you want to talk about? What you suggested this week?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, in a way, this all plays into dexterity, and the way I came about this question was, I don't know, I just have these things going on in my mind all the time, and you're like, how, like, if you were going to build a society that's more physically active, like where do, like, in terms of anything else in society, like at a certain level it starts in schooling. Like that's when your baseline attitudes towards certain things develop, and of course people go beyond that, but if you're going to have some type of baseline, where does it lie? And normally that's in your schools. So if I'm thinking more like on a macro level, if you're going to develop a more physically able society or more physically tuned society, it would come down to physical education. And just like, I don't know what it's like in Europe, but the state of physical education in the United States, well, I guess some places are different. If you have a specific private school um, with a certain charter or something like that, it may be different. But typical public school is like, at least when I was there, I remember you would go to gym class 2 or 3 times a week. You would warm up with like jumping jacks and crunches, walk around the gym in a big circle, and then play. You would have different sports that you would play. So basketball, volleyball, kickball, any one of those things. But it wasn't really like, it's not necessary. It's getting kids, like the idea of physical education in American schools now is just getting kids active for 40 minutes a day or whatever. Like that's their goal. It's not actually educating anybody in what it means to be physically active or physical or anything about the body. I mean, you have like health classes and stuff like that, but um, that's not. It's not treating the subject as if it really matters. It's more of like the treating it as if it's just like a throwaway period, which often it is, because like for science classes, like in school, I would have physics, and then like every other week you have a lab, and instead of going to gym, you go to the lab for physics. At least that was my experience in high school. So you get your physical education gets thrown away for whatever scientific lab you have. So if it's biology or chemistry or whatever. But my point is that it really, the physical education in schools, at least in America, is not taken very seriously. And my question was, what would a proper physical education class look like if you were designing it today? Like what would be the important things that you're teaching? How do you teach someone to be physical? Is there a certain level of physical intelligence that could be taught? What are the important skills that you would want to teach either kids or adults? Um, what would you want them to be thinking about or trying to explore, or what would you be teaching them? And also, like, if you expanded beyond that, what would a this is a term I threw at you just because it popped in my head, but like if there was the physical humanities at a university, what would that be like? Because it's not like most of the, if you go into any type of physical domain in um, for college or university, now you're going to sports science, exercise science, um, some type of medical field, nursing. Um, you could do whatever, physical therapy, but those aren't necessarily. It's teaching you about the body. It's always a very scientific driven like those are all scientific fields where you're learning about different structures and um, biological processes and that skew of things, but it's not actually uh, uh, you're not actually learning to use your body any better. I mean, you can, a lot of people do because like that's part of the work, but it's not. There's something missing there. Maybe I'm talking around it, not maybe getting to the point. But there, like that's the impression I get is that there's something. Um, I don't know. There's not a philosophical element to that those fields at the higher levels, say when you're at like colleges or universities. So like I guess the main point that I kind of want to flesh out is like what does a proper physical education um, program or schooling, what would that look like? Like what would people need to know if you're going to raise a society that's going to be more attuned to their physical life? So that's my starting.
Cool. So big topic. So like to talk about to define the problem a little bit more. So like that you said they do physical education for the kids or whatever, like 40 minutes. They just want to get them moving, but it's not really. It's kind of it's the way it's organized. It's kind of a side issue where you just do this thing. We know we need to get them active so that then they behave better in the class and then they can do the work better or whatever, or just kind of balance it out or something like this. Or in some cases to give the less smart kids something that they can be good at. You know, that I remember this in my school. That was kind of a unsaid, semi unsaid thing. Whereas really, so it's like kind of backwards. So they've got like the development of a person begins physically. You begin, the movement comes before words. Yeah. Words comes pretty soon. So, in the beginning was the word. Well, in the beginning was movement. But in the beginning was movement, but then words came too, and then words and movements are combined, much more integrated and combined, and affect one another than we realize because it's so close to us. So when you get to school, it's backwards. You've got all the words, so like the academic subjects that they're learning, and then the physical is kind of put off to the side, rather than the word-based learning growing out of the physical and coming on top. Even if like the flowers takes up more space than the stock, however you want to say it, but the physical should be the basis for these things, but it isn't, or at least it's not in most schools. So if you're lucky, you have parents and people around you and friends and stuff when you're little that you're doing lots of physical things. If you're not, you go to school and you're just straight into all this much further, higher level, higher, not necessarily better, but higher level in terms of development, ways of learning, things to learn, and you haven't developed a proper physical basis, not really. And then people are wondering why people are unhealthy, unhappy, don't know what they want to do. There's no complete disconnect between theory and practice all through schools and universities. Is kind of the standard thing in the West, really, is theory and practice are just separated. And like you say,
the structure of like a classroom is, well, it's structured. It's high, like you're sitting at a desk facing forward. Sometimes I guess they sit kids in groups of desks or at a table, but it's all very much like this is the knowledge component, and then you have the recess component, or then you have the gym component, and it's all separated. Mm-hmm. But it's the industrialization of education. Like the whole education system comes out of the industrial era in terms of how it's structured. You have your bells that bring you to the next period, just like you have your lunch break bell, and this signals noon. And
I mean, the thing was designed to make people behave. It was designed to train people to be on time and respond to instructions for the for industry, for factories. I mean, it was like, as far as I understand, I'm not an expert in this, but as far as I understand, it was like openly designed for that. That was the point, because people couldn't be on time. People like time doesn't, like clock time. People couldn't be on clock time. People were on natural time or sun time or however you want to describe it. And to get people to turn up on time was a huge deal. So they trained them through school, and then you just went straight to the factory. And now we have this system from 100 years ago, or however many, the system became obsolete. The economic system we're being trained for became obsolete decades ago, but we still have the system. And obviously the physical education would never really been an issue at the start, because they were going to go and work physical factory jobs anyway. So it's like it was just a case of making them strong, getting them to do the basic stuff, because they needed them to be. They didn't want their joints to wear down too quick. It was more efficient of a worker once he was trained to work for more, a little bit longer till he retires, than to have to get a new one. It really is that kind of treat people like machines kind of metaphor that's kind of behind it, and this is exactly the same thing in schools. It's not about the physical education. It's not about a basis. It's just a side issue. It's not taken seriously. And then they don't take you could have physical education could be from within that. You could teach pretty much everything else. You could if you started there, you could go from there and teach everything else. You can teach, physics. You can teach mechanics based on things that are based in like the physical things you're doing. You can abstract out that kind of way of looking at it, but you've started with the physical. You could teach history by going through, may as well mention the ancient Greeks now, because I'm going to come to them at some point. But you can teach history. You could teach, like most subjects, you could fit into. You could grow out of some physical training, and then it's meaningful to the person, because they're like, it's now got some basis in real life. You don't need to then go and do fitness things later to kind of embody your knowledge. It was already embodied, or it's already activated within you as you're learning it, because it's meaningful. You're doing something with it already. Does that make sense?
Yes. The thing that came to like physics, you could clearly see physics or sciences. You could see, like, if you're doing something in the physical world, like if you have a biology class and you're actually exploring the woods and looking for animals and plants and that. Again, same thing with chemistry. You could go out there and have the different smells and look at the dirt compositions and those things. Physics along the same lines. I was even thinking in terms of a history class. If you're going through like the history of a certain battle or time period, and you're trying to get a kid to understand why, like, it's important to have the high ground in a battle, and you brought them out to a hill, and you just you had two groups of kids try to throw like a kickball or something to each other, and see why it's so much easier to throw from the top of the hill than the bottom of the hill going up.
And then have them come up with strategies for taking advantage of it even more, or for making the disadvantage less if they can, or whatever. And they're thinking, and they're moving, they're thinking, they're acting, it's already like, and then they'll remember it. So like that's the kind of thing you could use, maybe not directly unless you're, if you're in a field battle, but you definitely indirectly you would use that later, because people always say, I don't use anything I learned in school. I learned this, what use was this kind of a formula I learned in maths or whatever. There's plenty of useful things from mathematics you can use in that are used in sports and various other things. So you could easily have it all integrated.
And even you have people, like, it doesn't even have to necessarily be in nature. Like you could teach the concepts of an English class if you brought someone out to a city sidewalk and said, observe 5 people that walk by, and then write a story that incorporates all these people into it. Like what is it about that person that you see walk by? Like what are the details you can pick up on? How do you describe them? Um, it's also it's a physical thing. It's part of physical intelligence, is being able to, it's a physical side of physical intelligence, to be able to take in those details, those data points, and then arrange them into a storyline that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, we essentially just taken what is normally taught in the classroom and just gave it a more practical application in the physical world. Not to say that the classroom time doesn't matter and all that, but I don't want to get too hung up on like making the subjects more physical, like the different school subjects.
No, yeah. So, like, to be clear for people, we're not saying it should be like the Japanese corporations where, you know, at 10 o'clock the alarm goes off and everyone does some jumping jacks or whatever and then goes back down to whatever we don't mean that. It's a much deeper, wider, broader thing we're talking about. That.
Yeah.
So like,
go ahead.
I want to go.
Oh, I was going to bring it back to like, if I was designing a program or a school or whatever it may be, what would the curriculum look like for a true physical education? And I'm thinking through this, and I got to like, what are the aspects of a healthy human? Like, what in terms of fitness or physicality, what would be important? One would be a good understanding of like running, cardio, like how. So I would start with one concept like that. Good cardiovascular endurance. Why is that important? You're a bipedal creature, so you have you would help someone understand like why you're on two legs. I would bring someone out, say if you had like a group of kids you're teaching or whatever, you could have them say, all right, here, we're going to start here, and then 100 feet out, you're going to run, and you're going to try 5 different running patterns, with your head up in the sky, with your feet out to the side, with your feet pointed forward, and just try them out and see how fast you go, see how easy it is or not easy. And it's not enough to like, where if you're running with an improper form, you're not going to hurt yourself. Like, you don't have to run that fast, but you could actually have someone learn what is the more efficient way to run that way. Like, is it more efficient to have your feet pointed outward and try to like run in that pattern, or is it more efficient to have them pointed forward or even inward? And are you pushing down or are you pushing back? Is your and like you would have them test each time, and don't have them run a far distance, but in that way, like, you're learning like the mechanics of your body. You're teaching someone the mechanic, and it's not by directive saying like, oh, you put this here and you have to run in this certain position. They're learning themselves as to what actually feels like it works better. And then, I mean, to integrate some of the concepts that you may have, if you videotape this, Kevin, you can see what actually is going well and what's not going well. Because
yeah, you
like you
compare your feeling of what you did to you make it social. You have the other kids analyze and say what they saw. So they tried to do this thing. They tried to walk by placing their feet in a certain way. Did they manage it? The person goes, yeah, I did. And then the kids around will go, nah, you didn't actually. You did this other thing. Oh, that's weird. I felt like I did. So it's teaching a kind of humbleness for people, for children in their knowledge. But they're still like, but it's not humiliating them, and it's not demoralizing them. It's like, oh, I didn't realize because you're immediately giving them the next step. Well, try this other thing, or no, now with modern technology, use video, see what happens. And then you as long as they feel like they're getting better at it, then it's okay to be making the errors. So the other thing you said there was the about the mechanic, like the kids with the mechanics. Young kids are already interested in their own mechanics. It's interesting to them how their things work. They're breaking up toys to see how it works. They try to figure out their body. This whole the whole of a child's early life is trying to figure out how to walk. It's like trying this way and trying that way, trying all these things. And then you just become obsessed with your body at different stages. You're playing with different parts of your body, and you're doing things different ways. Everyone's already interested in the mechanics, so that should be utilized to learn from that anyway, without them giving. Just work with what they're already interested in. A young kid, if you're talking about early school, the boys are already interested in running around and throwing things around and stuff. Start with that. It doesn't need to, rather than try to train them to sit down and behave at age 5. It's insane when you could just have them do the thing they want to do and start adding in the other more conceptual learning to do with it. Like hide the vegetables in the food. So it's all real. It's real then. It's the only way of saying it. Natural is not quite the right word because it doesn't just happen by itself. Obviously it's natural, but other humans have to be guided by somebody older who knows more stuff, who knows more things to help them through it, and that would be the role of the teacher. It would be to, obviously you're not just going to let them do anything that they want, but you're also not going to make them try and sit rigidly in a chair, which causes all these other problems, mental and physical, when you could have just been doing what they were wanting to do anyway and using that. It's insane when you think about it, but it's how do you, if you have a giant machine that's working one way, it's hard to just kind of change it.
Yeah. There's a couple other aspects to a type of that example of an education. One, just by virtue of trying the different experiments or scenarios of running through that, you're exercising and you don't realize it. You're moving your body and you could, so you don't even have to think about exercise when you're doing things like that. Or try, obviously your heart rate's increasing and
you're generating insights. Because how often is it you hear somebody online will say, oh, it's amazing how much after I've done a workout, how much clearer I can think after. And they're late 20s or 30s or something. They're only just realizing this now. You should have known that all your life. There's no reason not to know that what you're doing physically is affecting how you're thinking. It's because the whole, again, the theory and practice has just been separated for so long that we don't even think that they're connected. We just the movement stuff's just a thing you do on the side so that you're fit enough to then when you get down to the real serious business of thinking about the academic stuff, then you're healthier and you can think better. They'll maybe think that it's connected like that, but it isn't they're not together already, which they are. And we've talked about in the last videos, they develop together through evolution and through person's life. And what we're doing is talking about just training this thing that happens anyway. It's not there's no we're not coming in with some utopian ideas about the way education should be and try to get everyone to change. We're saying use what was already there anyway. The system just now is trying to make people change, is making people change from that, and splitting theory practice, mind body, however you want to say it. And then now guys like us are trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again years later when there was no reason for him to fall off his wall, pushed off his wall. That's enough of that analogy. But anyway, on you go. Sorry, I'm caffeined up and talking too much.
No worries. I enjoy it. You're in an example like I described, you're exercising without saying, okay, I'm going to have my group that I'm teaching, I'm going to have them run 2 miles. They end up running 2 miles just by virtue of doing the class, so to speak. And then you could also break this down. I brought up the example of mechanics, but now it's okay, now run that same amount of time, but only do it breathing through your mouth, do it breathing through your nose, and see what the difference is when you come back and do that. Or you're teaching them to feel different parts of their body. Like a lot of people don't like I guess the term is proprioception or interoception. Whatever, like it just being inside your body, and unless you're running experiments where you're directing people's minds to focus on those things as they're doing the action, they don't develop that skill, which it is a skill to be able to kind of pinpoint different parts of your body just by placing your awareness there or your mind's eye there. So those are other skills. You could, over time, you could measure like, okay, we're going to try this on week 1, and then we're going to do some other stuff. And then 4 weeks from now, we're going to come back and do the same thing. And you're going to take notes on how you physically changed within that time period. So that's like another growth in the ability to maintain, or not maintain, but even enhance endurance, stamina. And then you have like, you're not just telling someone what endurance and stamina are. They're physically experiencing what endurance and stamina are. So these are
so you're
all
saying
things.
so the person says, oh, I can run for much longer now without stopping. I can run. It'd be more real than that. They'll say, oh, I can now run past the third gate now without stopping. I can reach the third gate without stopping. Say it's like an outdoor run. And now you're explaining
to them, I don't have to take a break after 3 laps back.
And now you're saying that's endurance, and and then you talk about endurance, and then they're like, it's a real thing to them now. Whereas now it's like just this thing you learn, and then on some level, you know, the two things are connected. That's the endurance thing, but it's not real in your experience or the things that you do in your actions. It's not real. I think that's one of the things we're getting at here, is that it has to be there in your together in your actions, not intellectually. Oh yeah, I know those two things, both things. Yeah, you maybe know both those two things separately, but they're in different domains. They're like two friends, you know, in different places that have never met each other, and then they meet each other, and you don't know. Which we talked about in the podcast. Yeah. So want to go?
Yeah. So all of those things, like there's so many, a simple drill like that, or if you had a class with, and it doesn't have to be kids either. I mean, could you imagine if you had a group of adults or like people, people don't pay attention to this stuff enough. So it's kind of like they're all kids, your average person. So to get a group of adults to go through this too, like you're, to bring up the term psychophysical, like you're thinking about the action, you know the definition, you know the feeling of what it feels like to be in those different situations because now you've experienced it. And that's when the actual physical learning, physical education comes into play. And then you can use that, like if you're doing that and you're trying to figure out figure out solutions to certain problems as they're prompted by a teacher, then you're also training dexterity too, because I have to figure out maybe is it more efficient to run, like if the problem is like get to the bottom of a hill as quickly as you can, is it more efficient to actually run in a like straight down path, or can you do it if you switch back a little bit? Do you have more efficiency going that way? I mean, it's probably a straight down path is more efficient or quicker, but you don't necessarily know. Or maybe that puts load your muscles or chains of muscles differently. Experiments is what the teachings to like you do. It's concepts and of the academic study and everything that people are learning and applying in real time to what they're doing. So action, the look of the action. You've completed the action, and of what physical education means is to be able to It's understanding concepts on multiple domains as they relate to the physical world, and having the thoughts or ideas to back them up or to explain them as you're doing them. So, I mean, I brought up the example of cardio or running or endurance. So, I mean, that would be one aspect of a healthy person in terms of the weight. And it doesn't have to be like a barbell weight, but if you just had like a whatever, like a sack of potatoes on the floor, and how do you pick that up most efficiently? Or what's the best way to learn how to move and bend? You could do the same thing thinking about your joints and mobility. I brought up body awareness, like different experiments to teach people how to move, like the tilt of their pelvis or their hips or their rib cage in and out, side to side. How do you move around your spine, your shoulders, your feet? You could bring someone through an entire. It would be a fun course to bring someone through the stages as an adult or as like a grown person, maybe a teenager even, bring them through the stages of, okay, like what are the locomotive movements from birth to adulthood? And it's like laying down on the ground, picking your head up, rolling over, getting one leg under you to crawl, and then crawling, all the different types of crawling. You could do then walking, running, jumping, throwing, like all these different motions that you've developed over whatever 2 decades of life, your first 2 decades of life, to bring someone back to that and have them try to relearn it as an adult, is that would just be like an interesting experiment to do. And it would teach someone, if you're open-minded to it at the time, like you're learning all the different muscles incorporated in having to do those movements, how to do those movements properly, what's the more efficient way to do them. I mean, you could look at how a baby crawls and see if you can mimic that, and if it makes sense for an adult to crawl in the same way with different proportions than a baby does. Because obviously, like, if you look at a child, their head is enormous compared to the size of their body. So does crawling in the same pattern make sense for an adult to do it the same way?
And what you have there is a way in of teaching mechanics, because then you're going to start talking about the different weight of things and the position of things, and what kind of, and how gravity affects things. It's all there in just figuring out what's the difference in a child's way of crawling and an adult's way, and what needs to change and why it needs to change. It's all there. Like the whole of life's knowledge is in everyday situations if you look at it in the right way.
Yeah. And there's all these different, I mean, so many different angles to come at this from that aren't like the normal physical education as you would think about it in today's, the way it's taught today. And at the end of that, I think, is where you start getting into like specific sports, or you would like I'm thinking, like, where does this end up? Like, what's the end trajectory if someone's learning, has a true physical education program, and it may be one, designing your own sport and then learning what exercises you will need to become really good at that sport. And is it strength? Is it speed? Is it strategy? Is it wits that you have to develop to try to do well at the sport? So that would be like, in my mind, if someone was in this program and you get to the point where you're at like your senior year of college or whatever, and you need to come up with a thesis, that's the thesis, is like you you now take whatever, develop in a certain way so I could make my body specialized for this one sport. And that in itself is another type of and then two, you're acting it out. Like, do I do more running or weightlifting, or maybe neither of those? Maybe it's a third thing that you need to learn how to do. Yeah, those are all my the vast trajectory of things that I think would be important for learning a true, like to have a true physical education in, I don't know, school. Doesn't have to be school. That's the other thing. I don't know if it maps well onto current institutions, or it has to form out of a new institution. I mean, you could have we talk about like the methods of like Greek physical activity or learning. And if you had like different histories from across the world, like if you could learn certain martial arts from Chinese traditions, or there's a ton of physical traditions from across the world. India, Greece, I'm sure Rome had their own traditions. And so, yeah, it's almost endless what you could add into this. But the key thing here is like, it's not kids going to a certain place to get their heart rate up for 40 minutes. It's they're going through and they're thinking about how to move physically, what it is to be physical. They're putting their body into the motions. They're finding different ways. And you're actually, and it doesn't necessarily just have to be kids, but you're educating yourself physically in terms of how to move, what is movement, giving yourself definitions and experience to go along with those definitions. And it's just, to me, that's what physical education is. It's learning all of those things so you can use them. You can act in the world. You may still have a job where you're working on a computer for most of the day, but you know how to move and why it's important. And yeah, you just have a better than any other knowledge work that you have to do by virtue of moving better or moving more. Yeah, so those are my basic thoughts. I mean, I could go on for a while, but I don't even know if this is necessarily, the more I think about this, it just kind of expands more in my mind, because it's like, what else can you throw into this? And you could have, it's almost endless where you could go with this, but I don't know how it integrates into the current system that we have, just because we're not geared towards it. So unless someone's interested in this stuff and goes out to find it on their own, they will not be exposed to it.
Yeah, I mean, there's the machine, let's call it. There's not really, how will we put it? There's political disincentives to do this, because if people are trained like this, if you're physically competent and able to experiment and figure things out on your own, you're not as easy to rule over. It's as simple as that. That's the way you're training all the people. So when you've got like, it's different for something like the ancient Greeks, because it's like a city state, and the city wants this because it's like, it's smaller, it's local, it's they're at war and with other states and whatever. But so they want fully competent, strong people in every way. Our system doesn't want that, not really. They just want people to be healthy enough to get the heart rate up. They just want them healthy enough to do their job and to play their cog in the machine, to be the cog in the machine. One thing that came to mind earlier when you were talking was, there's a lot of people now. There's like a lot of people aren't happy with the kind of idea of sports and competition and stuff in schools because it's it's saying it's not fair to the ones who aren't as physically skillful or gifted or whatever. But one thing about teaching it this way is dexterity and stuff. So that's a different issue about the benefits of competition stuff. I don't want to get in. That's not my point just now to talk about that. My point is that having this kind of dexterity-based, physically and mentally engaged way of learning, it allows the children who aren't as naturally physically gifted to excel. Because if there's strategy involved and stuff, the smart kid who might not be very good physically can then be an important person in the figuring the thing out. So he's not going to win the 100 meters race. He's not going to, like, all these things that are very athletic specific, like you're more or less born enough potentially to be an athlete, like at a certain level. And but having it like that means everyone can play their part, find some part where they can excel at, where you're not going to have this where the like the stereotypical all the jocks winning all the stuff and all the nerds or geeks or whatever they call them now, being rubbish at all those things but then good at the computer class, that kind of thing. So how you would make the computer class physical, that's a different question. But but in general, so that it's way more fair like that in that sense, if that's a concern for people, because you don't need to pretend then that everybody's the same. You just let them be good at their thing. And people who aren't good at any one thing will get better because there's lots of different examples around them. They're not being split between the ones who can do it and the ones who can't. The guys at the end who don't get picked for things. The guy who got at the end who doesn't get picked. The guy at the end who doesn't get picked for the rough team sports may be the best person to have in some activity that you're doing later, because he's smart or whatever, or he knows something, or it's much more friendly to everybody in that way, I think, while also not holding back the good people. So you're not like making them, forcing them to, you're not bringing them down to a lower level. You're allowing them to excel as well. And then people can just be good rather than everybody have to be a same level of bad, or mediocre, really is what it is. Yeah. So that came to mind when you were saying that, because it's not when we're talking about becoming more skillful physically or whatever, it seems like a really individual thing, but actually it can be a collective thing where you're getting all the, like, it's bringing a whole group up rather than just a person on their own, which is good. And then this is where then you start interacting and then learning other things and using everybody's skills. But so my point is, to summarize this ramble, is that you can set it up in such a way that everybody is improving and everybody's encouraged to be excellent without it immediately humiliating and removing the less gifted people, and without it holding back the more gifted people, put it that way. And why would it be like that? Because that's the way it's always been. There's always been tribes of people, and some people are good at this, some people are good at that. The men in general are good at these set of things. The women in general are good at these set of things. There's a few in each group that's better at the other thing, but in general, that's just the way it is. And in every group of men, some of them are better at one thing, some of them are better at the other. It's just the way it works. So to put them in the school into the machine, and you just try to make everybody the same and have them like an okay level of mediocre, it's like a fear of it just being messy and uneven. And then everything I'm saying now is already like politically problematic to lots of people.
Yeah.
So, like it's difficult to do anything with basically impossible to try and change the machine as it is. I think this thing has to be done on the outside, really, or in small schools, or in whatever comes next when all these things collapse.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. I was thinking like it could, like you could have a program like that if you have, there's a lot of it. One, I think there's a lot of people homeschooling now. So like that's one potential where you could have integrate these concepts, obviously, because you're just teaching your own kids or your local community of kids. Or certain private schools, I think they have, like I mentioned earlier, certain charters or directives that they want to implement. Hey, you ever see the video of I don't know a lot about it other than the video that I've seen or a couple videos, but there was a school, it was a high school in the 60s. It was called La Sierra. I think it was in California, I would assume. But it was a very like physically regimented high school, and the videos are just all these kids or young men, and they're all like doing different exercises, and it looks very much like a organized in the same way, maybe like a more like militarily organized. Not that it was a military organization, but everybody was in rows and taking turns and following one after another in the lines or jogging all the whatever. It just looked more of that skew. But I don't know a lot about it. Have you ever seen the videos of this?
I haven't seen that one. No, I'd heard about it, but I haven't seen the videos. What you're saying sounds more like they're kind of machine-like rather than organic. It's very like every single person in a different place, like a part of a machine, and it's, I would say, overly ordered. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I didn't want to mean. I was just trying to describe it. I wasn't trying to make a point that it was overly ordered or anything. But it's when I've talked about this before in terms of physical education, a lot of people bring up this example of the La Sierra school because you see it's really interesting, the video, because it's not common. And it was something, I think it was in the 60s, and it was like a new thing that they were trying to do. And it was all guys that were they're all very fit, and they're all doing these different exercises, and it was part of their school program. So a lot of people bring it up as an example, and I think what I'm talking about goes beyond what even they were doing there, because again, that's just like, it's a guy with a whistle, a coach, like telling them to go through these stations and up down, and so it's good because it gets everybody very physically active, but there's not an intelligence side of it, or at least just from the 2-minute video, I wasn't able to glean that there was an intelligence side of it. It's more so about just building a physically capable youth.
I think I've come up with a good way of describing the difference between what we're talking about versus that. Where you're basically, the distinction you just made is that it's the difference between figuring things out. You're learning like the way of doing is figuring things out. That's what we're talking about. And then things like that, it's more, you would call it going through the motions, where the guys with the whistle, and you've got there's the movements have been given, and you have to do them, and the guy's making you do them. When we're talking about, you're doing the movements, as we're talking about a way of doing it where you will do similar movements. Actually, it won't be so regimented. There'll be a much wider variety of movements, but you could be doing just as many movements, but they're part of solving a problem or performing some action that you had to figure out. There's a mental, intelligent component to it. So you've got like, this is one of the problems I think I have with a lot of the way Eastern practices, movement practices, are taken into the West, is the people just take on a set of movements and they just go through the motions. Here's all the movements. Okay, I just do these motions and I pay close attention to the movements. There's no intelligence in that. Whereas the guys who came up with those movements, of those practices in the early days, would have had a lot more intelligence and thought involved, and there's various concepts and philosophies and stuff going on. It's exactly the same with this. We're talking about having a system of thinking that's around and within the physical education. I mean, it's education. It's not physical repetition. We're talking about physical education. So you're having to learn. You're learning something, you're making it part of you, and you're unfolding potentialities that you have, or most people will have. But you're leaving it open enough for it to be expressed in its own ways based on people's differences, rather than trying to make everyone do the exact same amount of push-ups, same amount of pull-ups in the same order and stuff. There's obviously a benefit to sequences, and people figured out doing things in certain orders and certain amounts have certain effects. But if you optimize it too much for one set of effects, you're going to cause a side effect somewhere else, or you're going to miss out on something else. So, something that most people obviously know is if you're doing strength training and there's a specific between sets, there's a specific amount of time that will mean you'll grow muscles better if you leave this amount of time between sets or whatever compared to other times. But if you do it like that, okay, the muscles will grow, but there's other things you're missing out on that aren't being measured. You're losing other things by doing that. It's fine if that's your goals, but you have to be aware that you're losing other things. And if you blow that up to us, if you expand that to the system, like we're talking about, you're creating a whole culture of people that have those side effects wherever they are, or have those blind spots. They don't even know that they're side effects. They just can't sit in a seat for very long when they get older. They just can't, they get all these back problems. Oh, it's just because of modern technology. No, it's, ancestors did various movements that were harder than what we're doing, and it's not as simple as just blaming technology. It's something that we're doing or not doing. So when you in the whole system of the school like that, I haven't watched that obviously, but I will watch that school. Is similar ones I'd seen. They just seemed this. They look very regimented. Everyone looked ultra fit though, but it looked too.
Yeah, they're all very, very fit people.
It just looked too going through the motions rather than figuring things out. So those guys are going to be good soldiers following orders, but they're probably not going to be good strategic, tactical type of people who have to figure things out for themselves necessarily. You're kind of, that would be the ones who would be good in spite of that training, not because of it.
Yeah. So the one reason I wanted to bring that up is because, like I said, when you mention like what's a really good physical education program, and a lot of people point to that, and it seems it's very fitting that it happened in the 60s because it was, I believe it was the 60s, but that was like, it just shows that there was not a lot of other forethought into, my point is that that was a low resolution, despite people automatically like jumping on the bandwagon for, oh yeah, we should have something like this in all schools, and they should implement this nationwide. Like, people really like this when they see it, but it's also very low resolution in terms of what it actually means to be practically capable, or to also think physically. Because yes, like you mentioned, they're going through the repetitions, but they're missing out on the broader context of what it means to go through those repetitions, or to deviate from them, why it would be important.
So like, you need to ask yourself, if after you've gone through all this training, you do all these repetitions, all this training for, could be a few years. And then if you stop doing it for a couple of years, what are you left with? Or even like 6 months, if you stop doing it, if you just go back to the way you were and there's nothing left, you like have to keep doing it to get the benefits. You have to keep doing the movements. If you're left with nothing, then you haven't. There's no intelligence in that. Then you've just gone through the motions. It's just repetitive, mechanical in the bad sense. And whereas if you've learned something from the point of view of dexterity, you still have something, even if you stop doing those things. You've learned something. You now have this whole set of potentials. You're capable things that you're capable of. You've developed this capacity for dexterity, which is not just a skill. It's like a higher level thing where you're able to move intelligently. You all have that forever, roughly speaking, compared to just because if you like a guy, you do weights and you stop going, you just lose it all and you're back to where you were. Like the structure and people wouldn't have changed usually, and they're just like back to the way they were. So you're just like treading water if you're not doing things intelligently.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's. I'm just guessing from based on what you're saying that's probably that's the downfall of those things, but they're moving in the right direction. So it's not like to criticize people for getting it wrong. We're just saying what's the next step.
Yeah, and maybe like that's a good concept to start with, but then like I think what I described earlier is more along the lines of what we could like. It's just more sophisticated in my eyes. It's because one, like you mentioned, it applies to a broader group of people. So you make it more accessible by allowing everybody to show their talent in different capacities based on the given task at hand. So if you put kids through the same program that you saw back there, you would have maybe like, I don't know, 10% of them being able to actually do what is being asked, and the rest just get cast aside, which is not good. Like if you're trying to actually build a society where everybody is more healthy, more fit, like that's actually going to move the needle. And it's not by casting people out, it's by making it more accessible to them. And I'm not saying like, I mean, I don't want to be misconstrued as like a person that thinks inclusivity is necessarily always the best thing, because there's so many. It's a political hot topic to talk about inclusivity, but in terms of if you actually want to make your population, your nation strong, like you better be a little bit inclusive or know how to fold in people of different talents into that pool to make it work for them. And just doing the like the regimented thing is not going to work for everybody. But you can teach physical education in a way that doesn't have to be regimented or as regimented. You could teach it in like the ways I described, and have it more even if someone doesn't continue it on, like you said, they take some of that basis knowledge and are able to use it in other domains or areas of their life. So just to sum up, that my point was that it's a cool looking program. It's very low resolution for actual applicability. And you're not necessarily, like when you're doing that, you're going through the motions, but you're not picking up on like, can you teach someone about breathing patterns through that? Like, what does it mean to breathe efficiently while you're going through those movements?
And if a student there, like a young pupil, takes an interest in specifically the breathing, then they would be encouraged to learn that in this sort of, now they're moving into biology class with it. You know, like you just go with, you would go with it, not in an absolute way, go with every single thing they say and every whim of a child, obviously. But if it's like genuine curiosity, then that can be built into the part of the class that then everybody's learning, and it's a real thing. It's not implanted later in a separate room. So like we've even got it set up so you go to a different room for each thing. You do English is in this room with this person, then you go to biology in this room with this person, and then it's just training your brain to think all these things aren't connected. Like obviously you have to kind of specialize or organize things not to get anything done. You can't just have one big room with everybody learning everything at the same time. But the way it's set up, everything's like boxed away in actual boxes in a building, box, with the different things safely put away in its own place, and then everyone can specialize in this thing, and other people specialize in this thing, and then some people try to connect the two things, but the two groups of specialists are going, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's not one of us. He's an outsider. And the guy try to connect things because doesn't know all the things. He'll make a few mistakes, and they'll use the few mistakes to trash the whole idea. But actually, half of what he said might be really useful to both sides. But there's not really we don't really have a system for bringing the different subjects together like that. No, not really. It's just kind of left to kind of maverick people or weirdos or guys who just happen to be specialists in two disparate fields and then link them together. But like most new ideas come from clashing together two different types of learning. And if the physical kind of stuff is at the basis of all this, it's going to be more real and to use the buzzword, embodied for each person and embedded in their life, in their real life from the start, from a child upwards. So then when they're learning stuff later, they're not just learning random things. They're not interested in pop trivia for no reason. They're learning things that are useful and then applying it and changing things around them and helping people around them. It's just automatically. We don't need taught to do this. You're just doing it. You know how the guy who loves building things mechanically knows how to do it. There's a problem in the local area and somebody needs something, they need, just to be like romantic about it. There's the well, the village well is broken and he needs to fix the mechanism or whatever, so you've got like, it's all meaningful and it's built into what people are doing anyway. That's what we've got away from, because now we have the learning the thing in an abstract way, and now you're going around looking where to apply it. Or they give examples at the end of the class, a few examples of a real thing, or like a little practical, like even in science, you'll get taught all the theory and then you do the experiment later, like as a sort of, to help you understand the theory. It's like, but it's upside down, when it should be like they're doing the things and then going, okay, what theory is coming out of that? Oh, okay, some guys have already figured this out already. Here's more of that way of understanding here's some more concepts to do with these kind of phenomena. And then, okay, we'll do it again. Now we understand more. Now we've got these terminologies we can use, and the physical movements and what we're doing physically is now enriched by the fact that we've learned these other things. And if it was the right way up, because everything's upside down, if it was the right way up, it would all just come out of what we're calling physical education. It wouldn't be physical education. It would just be the education. And it just branches out of what started physical for everybody. And then side effect is everybody's healthier, their heart rate's up and all those things, that the cogs in the machine are more efficient. You don't need to replace the cog. Don't worry, owners of this great big machine, your cogs will be more efficient and you'll get more use out of them and you can make more money from them in the long run. But they'll probably not want to. They'll probably not want to be part of your machine, and they'll know how not to be as well, which is what they really don't want. They really don't want trickstery, dexterous people, because they'll figure out. Dexterity is figuring things out, figuring a way around problems, and the machine, let's call it, is one of the biggest problems for people. So they don't want. You're not going to train people to get around the machine. It's the last thing they want. So it's kind of, the whole thing is rebellious, actually, in the modern society. It wouldn't be rebellious in some societies in the past, maybe some now, but for now, it's dexterity is almost indistinguishable from rebelling.
True.
Because you're not just wanting to sit there and absorb it in and just be happy with what you're told. You want to try it and find a better way, or ignore it and do something else.
What else would you add to this? I mean, I kind of laid out what I thought might be useful for like physical education, but do you have a different approach, or maybe something that I didn't hit on, or more specific examples of what would constitute
things
or
that people
even like
would be doing?
I set it up where it was like, what would a physical education program look like in school? But take school out of the equation. Like if you have a person on their own that's looking to be more physically educated or increase physical intelligence, if that's a certain term that you want to that you could use, like what would you say? Like, do you have any ideas about that, or anything different than maybe what I mentioned or what we've been talking about?
It's more just a sort of general way of teaching things rather than specific things. So like I'd be the way I'd like there to be more direct connection made between the way people are expected in academic subjects to get the concepts clear and defined and organize them. So you can start making sense of things and solving problems in that field. I'd like to be more connection with that, and yourself in your own body. So, for example, like defining the parts of your body and your own experience properly, and then the relationships between them, and then changing those relationships as you are solving problems. So you're physically organizing the parts, but you're also mentally organizing concepts at the same time. So I think when people are then learning the academic subject, it's all practical, and they're using it. Not that everything has to be practical. I don't mean like utilitarian. I don't mean that, but it's real. It's not broken off from the whole of life. So in terms of an actual thing in class, yeah, but I would definitely with some type of formal body mechanics for people, but experimental. They're actually doing movements, and I would have it social from the start, where they're commenting on each other in a constructive way. They're analyzing each other's movements and comparing things. In terms of actual...
Quickly on that, before you go on, isn't that an interesting thing, like phenomenon now, that like people are so against the judgment of others because it's not used as a constructive force, but it's really used to degrade other people, really.
Yes. But, well, this would be training people not for that. You would be humble because you're not right all the time, but also it's happening to you and to them. It's everybody together. So everybody's having a turn. Everybody sees everybody make a mistake. Everybody sees that everyone is the same struggle for everybody. You get over your, like, to go back to like using the video to record things and analyze your videos. You really, at the beginning, it's horrible. You're really self-conscious. You hate seeing the way you are. People hate seeing their like habitual postures or whatever on video. This is totally normal. There's no like good person who likes it. People cringe, but you very quickly get over it, and you just start treating your video, and you're just as like for me, it's just like another pupil. It's just myself, and I'm looking at my own things, and there's a detachment. So that kind of thing with kids would teach detachment from being self-conscious and being overly analytical about themselves. It's getting their internal dialogue out into social problem solving. They're not just like sitting at the back of the class with all these words in their head, which is then driving all these negative emotions and all those things. So you're not allowing weirdos to sit and be weird as much, but you're also not allowing the good ones to be smug and be dominant and stuff in a purely kind of like in a non-intelligent way, in a non-constructive way. They're being forced to share and to help bring other people up as well. It would just be built into it. So like something like that would be a basic thing for me. What age? Just that kind of age where they're getting more, they're already interested in mechanics like that, and they're asking for how things work and stuff. So it just depends. But if it gets too analytical, they need to be a little older, obviously 8, 9, 10, before they can really understand some of the stuff. But in terms of like what we'd normally call physical stuff, they should be things that look dexterous, things that you just know are dexterity based. So it's kind of hard to do in a school, a lot of the stuff, because you have to go out into you have to be in uncertain conditions to train dexterity, and that's against schools' health and safety. That's why I question, like, I kept on referring to this in terms of school, but like that was just what I defaulted to, because that's when you think of education, you think of school. Right. So, yeah. So like in terms of a person, like an adult, the mechanical stuff, again, start with that. So that's kind of like the operating system, and then all the different activities would be then like apps. So because when I say operating system, it's not really just mechanics, body mechanics. It's actually your mind. It's more your mind, actually, because you're having to get clear about what the body parts are, where they are, the relationships that are between them, and the relationships you want between the different parts, and then how you can use them in the most efficient way to do whatever it is you're doing, and then how your body mechanics then interact with different environments, and different activities and all those things. So there's like endless. But then from that, you're organizing your mind more, and then you can start applying then like apps. Now you've got the operating system, now you've be apps, going for apps. So just things like running obviously is a basic one, running efficiently, but also just the basics like endurance and stuff, because it's running is really out of fashion. It's getting a bit more in fashion now with people in our kind of sphere online, but running was really out of fashion for a long time. It was all about resistance training and you don't build as many muscles if you run and all this stuff, and they completely forgot many of the purposes and reasons for running. And anyway, that's another argument. But running would be a big thing. Something I was never taught in school that I still really I've only done a limited amount of, that I'm going to do more soon, is martial arts. I mean, it's crazy that's not more central. But again, there's no incentive for these things. It's beginning now. I'm surprised it's taking so long, but it's beginning now. Even like martial arts clubs and those things now there's going to be a lot of pressure put on them because they're politically there's political reasons that they don't want these things.
Can you say that one more time? You broke up there. I couldn't hear it.
So the thing I'm saying about that would help like children learning martial arts, I don't think that type of thing. I don't think that will ever happen, just for the simple reason is there's even now, right now, that's starting to become a problem for some political people, because they don't like what the perceived opinions of the people who like things like that, but also they don't. It's people with a bigger program than wanting to be told what to do. They're like disciplining themselves and stuff. There's no incentive for the machine to encourage that. So I really don't think that would ever happen. But in terms of an adult, obviously there should be something like that. And I'm speaking to myself here because I'm not doing that just now, but will be soon. So that's something that's like missing from me. Outdoor type stuff.
What are you going to be doing?
I'm not sure. There's a couple of different options here, but it's most likely going to be some type of kickboxing, but depending on which logistics of going to the place. But there's also like there's a couple other things that are interesting for different reasons, but not as full contact. But they're interested to me from like movement type of perspective. But anyway, we'll see. The other things people will need would be obviously like eating and diet and nutrition is a big one. That's part of this that you don't really think of. I mean, it's pretty easy to combine home economics classes. That's what we call them in UK. I don't know what you call them. Home economics with physical education classes. It's like should be, but they're not. One's for boys, one's for girls, more or less. Which is crazy because they should be for both for both to a certain amount, a certain level. But in terms of like an adult now, I mean, a lot of this you could teach online. You could have the person. You could give them projects and experiments to do and challenges to do over a long period of time. It's a long time. This requires a long time to teach dexterity, to improve at it. It's not something you do a 6-week program and do a before and after image on the internet and help a guy sell stuff. You'd be hard pressed to show it to somebody in a photo unless you're doing some weird kind of thing. But it's not about that. When you're improving it, you wouldn't even care about those things as much. It's not. You don't have that kind of tit for tat. I do this to get this benefit. I do this for this. It's more just you're just the way who you are. It's just expression of being alive. It's will to power, whatever it is. You just want to. You just do it and become it, and you. So my point being, the person learning it would have to be a long-term thing, rather than short. I mean, short-term you could teach aspects of it for definite and get people started.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't.
This is why I was. It is more of like it's a learning. It's a school. It's an education as opposed to a specific program. Because like to me, I mean, I guess you have learning programs or whatever, but it's not something that is easily programmed in terms of like programmed in your mind. Like you have to figure it out for yourself. So that to me is more education than or it's continued learning always. Like it's not like these things now, so now that's it. Like it's not like you comprehend it. It's like an active process of learning always. It's like a different mindset perspective.
Yeah, and you should be having aha moments and them all the time. You should be having realizations, insights all the time. It shouldn't be a thing that you have a list of things to do and then you just go through them to get them done to move on to the next thing. You're already not doing it if you do that. It's already, like if you're just following a program to get it done. There's a place for programs and stuff and plans, obviously, but that's upside down. I just find the whole thing is upside down. But for an adult, because an adult, you can explain these concepts to somebody, so they can start to learn it. But you have to commit to it. You can't, it's not like a no pain, no gain thing. You can't just sign up to something and make some guy shout at you for 6 weeks and make you lose weight or whatever. Well, you can do those things, but you can't do it for this because you haven't learned anything. It's just kind of stupid in the sense of non-intelligent. You're just like, take away your guy with the whistle or your guy with the whip and you're just go back to normal. Nothing's changed.
Yeah, unless you like so that's something that I was trying to grapple with. Is like there has to be some sort of the one thing school is good at is that like if you have a captured audience, like they have to be there. So it's for a long time. Like there's not like in terms of school children, they start in August or September and go to May or June. So and you have to bring them through the curriculum, but like the alternative is like people can choose when they want to do something, when they don't, which is great, but to actually stick with something that you don't see immediate results for, it does take a lot of discipline to carry on through. So
that's the thing about dexterity. It's like you have to. It's again the same business stuff is for clients. You want to get quick wins for the client so that they know this is the thing is working. I don't know how you do that with dexterity. It may be the quick wins are the like doing what we're doing here is talking about it, and the people get the aha intellectually. Oh, I didn't realize this whole realm of life, and I've been ignoring. And okay, so that understanding of it inspires them to keep to build the practices into their life. But I mean, if you're the type of person that's just wanting something quick out of it, you won't get it like that. You're seriously missing out. But you won't get it if you just leave. So if you're trying to teach someone it, like I don't know what the method would be to give them the quick wins, to keep them interested for their own benefit, or you just have to wait for the people who've tried all the other things and they know something's missing, and then they finally come around to this way. Because I mean, obviously I'm older than you, but we're not like guys. We're not 15 and 20 figuring this out. We're quite a bit older, so like you maybe have to go through all those mistakes to figure it out. Just in my own work, I tend to get people. My average age of people tends to be like late 20s. Is usually when people come. Late 20s, late 20s to mid 30s, or mid 20s to mid 30s really. It's just when you just need a certain level of experience of failures and fuck ups and trial and errors to realize there's more to just going through the motions with different things. Because you go through the motion with different things, you think this one is going to fix it all, and it doesn't. Then you think, oh well, I'll do this thing and this thing and this thing together, and then they'll fix them all, and then it doesn't. So then you're left with, everything's still separated. How do I bring it all together? And then you try to plug things together, and then you're back to where we are, where it's like, if you're starting from the beginning, how would this develop? And it's dexterity is how it develops. It's the principle underneath it all, I think.
Yeah, interesting about that age bracket that you mentioned, because it seems like, so like you get to a certain point in whatever you have been doing, you either figure out that it's not been working the way you want it to work, and you have two decisions at that time. So you either say, the hell with it, I'm just not going to do anything, or you have the people, which I think is most people, is like after that age, like you start passing through your late 20s, early 30s, and a lot of people, like their health or fitness or physicality just kind of drops off pretty heavy, or they just stop caring about it so much. And then you have another group of people, which I think is a minority, but a committed minority. They're like, no, I'm actually going to figure this out and figure out what's actually going to work because it matters to me. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but that was just it's like a clear, there's a fork in the road, and a lot of people.
I think that what the similar thing between the two extremes then is the young child at the school who's already interested in mechanics and his own body and movement and stuff. He's already running around all the time. And then the person you're talking about who's tried all these things, but once has decided to figure it out, it's that they are already they want to educate themselves. They don't need trained, they don't need told, they need help, but they don't need made to do it. They don't need the guy with the whistle, unless that's like for specific things. They may use that structure for specific things, but it's not the main thing for them. It's just wanting to learn. It's like we came back to this with Alex when we talked to Alex. It just came down to learning, and it comes down to wanting to learn. So the young kid wants to learn anyway. It's just built into the human nature. You try to learn things, figure things out. It's normal. Then it gets drilled out of you, and then you get a few people come up. Everyone's getting drowned from the machine, and then a few people come up for air. Usually later in their 20s, early 30s, whatever it is. Some people much later. Doesn't really matter. It's like as long as they do, and obviously it's easier. Some things are easier when you're younger. Some things aren't. Some things are easier when you're older. You just can't see clearly when you're young.
The people that would actually are committed to something like this are interested in just learning of itself. Like they want to become better, make themselves better, and they know that there's not an initial, like you said, it's not a simple exchange. It's not, I sign up for this and I do this and I get this result in X amount of time. Which is why one of the things I wanted to mention, like, I don't know if you talk about physical education, I don't know what the best format is for it. So in a lot of the examples that we brought up, it's all very much in person. Like there's something about, you said, like if you had a group of people, you would have one person doing the motion and then other people kind of critiquing it. And not critiquing in a bad way, but constructively critiquing it. But is something like that, there's something about having people around when you do these things, that it's just different than, say, like you're doing an online platform. Not to say it couldn't be done that way, but it just seems to have it real and it just makes it more real, have it physically real in front of you. It makes it more real. Or
at least, or minimum, that you have some kind of physical get together where things are expressed and tried out and used. so that even if you're only connected online in between, there was like a thread in between, but it was always becoming real in some way that's meaningful. So a lot of it, I always find it coming back to meaningfulness. A lot of these things, if it feels like meaningful to you, you're getting a lot of these things right. Because I found out when I stopped to try to do gym type fitness, which I've always hated. I don't like gyms. And started doing just like running through the woods. It just felt more meaningful. And I felt things like healthier and fitter and stuff as well. But the meaning came first for me. It felt more meaningful. And I've just noticed that with just focusing more on kind of dexterity type of stuff. It's just something, just climbing from one end to the other of something feels more meaningful than repeatedly going up and down on one place because you're needing to get so many of these reps in for that kind of movement or whatever it is. And that's not including the other benefits of doing it, more variation, stuff like that. But just in terms of, it just feels like it means something. I'm going from here to there, or like, I don't know. There's lots of versions of this where there's two options you could do, and one will be more meaningful than the other. Like you could jump, you could have a box, you could do like 2-foot jumps up and down onto a box, which is like, it's fun, but you're jumping up and down a box. I mean, in a kid kind of playful way, yes, that's kind of natural behavior. But another way, kind of not quite. But if you then go somewhere where you run and have to do multiple jumps over things that are in the way, it just becomes more meaningful because that is something that you may have to do, or your ancestors would have done at some point. So, like for me, one of the things I'm loving just now is there's a little park here with a small pavement down the middle, and there's benches on each side, and the benches don't have a back. So like wooden benches, so you can run, and I'm enjoying running down and doing like 1-footed leaps to the side, jumping sideways over the benches like this, until like it's quite a big jump over. They're quite wide, so you could trip on them, and they've got this wooden slat, so you could catch your foot and hurt yourself. So you really have to jump, whatever. This has been way more fun for me than try to do similar things in a fixed place, because there's something not real about the fixed place. So like to bring it back to like the same principle is true in the schools and stuff. If you're just in the same room doing things, it just becomes mechanical. It becomes just a repetition. You're just here to do these things here. It's a means to an end. Then you leave that place. Then you go to the next place, means to an end. If there's no frontier where you can explore and move out of, or just somehow feel like you're out in the real world, then it just doesn't mean as much. And that kind of principle applies to just everything. Foods, Eric's talked about this in the podcast, or at least on Twitter, about and on the podcast, if you're eating your ancestral diet or whatever, it's more meaningful to you, and it's going to be more healthy for you because of the meaning. So that's just a heuristic rule of thumb for people, is to do the things that are meaningful. Even if the meaning,
do you think that's part of physical intelligence, is finding meaning? Like, is that an intelligent thing, or to have physical? So here's another term, and I think this is a term that I read in that paper that I told you about, Richard Wall wrote, and the term is physical literacy, and it is finding meaning part of that in physical intelligence or physical literacy? Like, is that a key component of having a competency in that area?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose our ancestors would have the meaning of the physical meaning in physical activity was already built in because you had to do these things for survival. So for us, part of it is physical intelligence to find the things to do, because we're a step back from that, because we're like, oh, how do we get back to that stuff? incorporate that stuff or simulate that stuff now. So picking the right thing, yes, but then there's all levels involved. There's like the figuring it out intellectually and knowing whether it's the right thing logically, and then there's the feeling meaning of it. Then there's the physical. Is it physically like challenging enough, but not too much? Based on your stage, whatever it is you're doing. Can you involve other people in a way that's in a good way? Doesn't have to involve other people, but it's useful when it does. These things are definitely useful in real life, because if things continue to decentralize and it becomes messy, if you're used to doing things with other people physically, then that will, in a simulated way like this for fitness, then that will be easy to do things that now become like our ancestors, and it's about survival, and you actually have to do it with other people. So this is like really is practical. It's not like some kind of we've got spare time and like modern Westerners and just looking for we're just looking for the new fad or whatever. It isn't that. It's like it's the old fad. It was not a fad, but so I don't know if that answers your question. I know, in fact, it doesn't, but you know what I mean.
It's okay. I forgot what my question even was.
I'm not a question answerer, Keith. I'm a question asker. That's my thing. So
I don't know if I'm a question answerer either. Sometimes, and then I just keep on going.
No, we're doing both. We're I think, I don't know. The humble viewer will be the guest, the judge of this, but
yes, all yeah, I don't know. Was there anything else you wanted to hit on here? I mean, I
just one
the
thing.
The idea really education. I mean, it's something that's been rattling around for a while. But are you there?
Yep, still here. Yeah, it's bad signal. No, I mean, most of my thoughts on this are kind of abstract way of thinking about it that would lead to different things rather than like set specific things at this stage. If I had children, I would probably have different opinions, maybe based on things I'd seen them do, firsthand. I have nephews and a niece, so like I see a little bit, but I would probably have other ideas. Some of the stuff I've only started thinking about properly and acting on properly quite recently in my life, so I don't classify myself as an expert in any of this stuff at all. I just seeing the connections now, and I think a lot of other people aren't, and taking it from there. I wish I'd understood this stuff when I was like 20, but I just didn't. I actually would have understood this, I think, if somebody had properly explained it to me when I was 20, based on the way I was. It was quite kind of psychophysical way of thinking then, even then. Maybe not 20, 22 kind of age, 21, 22. So I'm hoping to do that for people now, because like that's one thing for children in school would be to explain to the smart kids that physical stuff is useful, from their point of view. It's like start with it being useful to them, that it will help them with the smart stuff. And also, in the same way as you want the physical kids to realize that there's an intelligent way of doing the thing that they're doing. They don't need to be meatheads. I know no one's trying to be a meathead, but you know what I mean? So just that kind of way of dealing with it. And that's the same way for dealing with adults. It's just getting people to realize that these two domains are not separate in their life, no matter how hard people have tried to make them separate, or how much they've become separate. They're not. And it's interesting when you realize that they're not. And as you said before, there's like so many, it's endless, all the ways you can go with it. And it doesn't need to be the same for everybody. That's the other thing. That's the other thing that makes it for the machine impossible to teach this, because it's going to be different for each person, and everyone's going to go off in a different way. And it's just not bureaucratically possible to do that. even if they wanted to, which they don't. But if they did want to, they wouldn't. It's not logistically possible. It's anti-bureaucratic. If dexterity is anything, it's anti-bureaucratic.
That's another one of those, like you mentioned earlier. It's one of those truly dexterous people normally find ways around the pain points, one of which is bureaucracy. So, yeah.
For definite. So you have to, that's the skill of it as well. The teacher has to find the way in for the person and not trick them, but make it their own thing, make it their own, so they're following their own interest. They're not, because again, if you're just doing it because you're told to do it, it's a means to an end and it can't be dexterous. Not really. It's something, I can't quite get it. It's something like, if it's a closed system, an open system, it's something like really general principle in the universe that's applied to this. It's a really general thing. It's something to do with if things are closed off, dexterity, no dexterity. If things are opened out, dexterity. Something like that. But I haven't thought that through yet. It's like almost a physics rule, a physics principle.
Finding the path of least resistance.
Finding the path of least resistance.
Yeah, I mean that's like an expression. You find
in more and more complex situations, finding but not just that though. Sometimes you want more resistance because you're having fun or you're practicing or you're train yourself. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's something to do with the means, because I've noticed like one of the guys in Thomas Bevan's group, he's always talking about content. Craig, I forget his surname, but he's always talking about content and art. He's always going against this idea of content and producing content and stuff. And he was talking about the difference in content and art, and he was talking lots of different things. What makes art? What's content? And the thing, I don't think he said this, but the thing to me is the difference between art and content is content is a means to an end. Art is an end in itself. So you make the thing because you like it and it's beautiful, or it might not be perfect, but you make it because you want to make the thing. It's not you want glory from it and you want to sell it maybe and all those things, but you're not making it. The thing itself stands on its own. You want the benefits after. Whereas content is, I'm making an article so that I get a link. I'm making this so that I get a customer. That's the main reason. That's the only reason. So like, as a means to an end. And I think dexterity is similar to that, where the end in itself is the doing it and the learning it. If you're trying to just do things like do this program or follow the guy in the whistle, it's now kind of just a means to an end now. You're just kind of going through the motions. I don't know how to describe it. You're just not thinking. You're not having to think. It's really hard to.
It's weird because I know what you're talking about, but I can't wrap my words around it to express it.
There's that book sometimes people talk about. I tried reading it years ago, but I did read it actually. Finite and infinite games. The difference between finite games and infinite games.
Yeah, James Carse.
That's it. Yeah,
Carse. Yeah, I've read it.
I think
it's a short book, but it's
I think this goes under that. I think dexterity is an infinite game, and programs and all those things are a finite game. That's probably a good way to describe it to people. Actually, maybe we talk about that the next time, because it is a game. Like, it's fun and it's like it's open ended. It's endless. Yeah, this is it. That's a good way to say it. Yeah, because all of the other things are finite games. So you can learn a little bit of dexterity to a certain extent. It's always bounded. Because like if you're doing a sport, there's certain type of training you do for the sport. You may do extra training around the edges depending on the trainer and stuff, but it's limited. And because of this sport that you're doing, you're closing off different possibilities, which is fine. You have to do that in some level. But dexterity is opening possibilities. It's closing enough to learn and grow and get better at, but keeping it, but then open again, close and open, rather than like again more and more narrow. Something like this.
That's the there's something here, yeah. this is a way of thinking that I see people. I'm not saying I'm immune to this either, but people always go down this line of thought that we're like, I see it applied to like macro context. Like they say, a lot of people are, they see like world events and they say, oh my gosh, things are going to get so much worse. It's going to get so terrible. And they're not able to see like, yeah, if things continue to get worse and people keep doing the same things, yeah, it's going to continue down that path. But the other thing that they don't get is that people are also acting like they will change their actions so things don't get worse as well. So, and I'm not saying like dexterity is making things worse or better. Like that's not the connection I'm trying to make. I'm saying that there is always, like you mentioned, there's a expansion and contraction of possibilities that's happening at any one point. And within that range of motion is when you have different trajectories branch off, because you have 3 options here, then it goes to 10 options, then back down to 5, and then opens up to 12. And then, so like with each decision or action, that the potential for different trajectories expands or contracts. And that's why I think a lot of people fall into that mentality that they only see it contracting towards one.
They see the closed system as it is now, and then they project it forward, still closed.
Mm-hmm.
Which is probably a symptom of everything we've talked about today. Of like that's the way it's taught as the kid. Everything's closed, so then they can only see like that. Whereas if you're taught what we've been talking about today, if you're taught like that, you're going to be more looking for solutions and coming out of it. You're just not going to, your brain simulating possibilities is not going to be simulating lots of closed system situations. It's going to be seeing, okay, down like that, and then change this tweak here, and then, this new thing here. And they'll just be the way you think. They'll just be thinking to you, or reality to the person. It won't be like it's a mental tool, but they're just doing it. And you would learn that by exactly the thing we talk about. Group of people say, no, do this, do that, and you're like, oh, okay, so try to imagine, okay, I'll try this thing. No, that didn't work. Or I thought that worked. They said it didn't. Okay, I'll try this other thing. Oh, I didn't realize that worked. They said it did work. Okay, so I have to interact with other people to get information that I don't have. And you're immediately already thinking about first order. Oh, but if I do that with my foot, then this happens with my elbow. So now you're thinking second order effects and all these things. So you don't need like, I'll go and do a course in probabilistic theory or whatever. You're already like that. Because it's normal.
You're in the actual like soup of probabilistic theory.
Probabilistic soup, yeah. You're drowning in your own. You're drinking the probabilistic soup. You're nourishing yourself on the probabilistic soup.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's I like that. I like that. That's a good. That's the thing about dexterity. You can generalize it out and generalize it down. You can reduce it down and to specifics, and then it just applies so wide. There you go. There's a good example of Highland talk. It just applies so wide. Is that correct? I don't think so.
No, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. But you didn't notice. See?
It's widely applicable, is what you would say, I think.
Yeah, I would have to say widely, or that was they're wide. So just like it's that kind of stupid phrases where like we just say things like that. And like I only speak a tiny amount of Greek. It's quite embarrassing, actually. I'm ashamed of myself. But I've noticed the difference between Greek and English is the Greek is the words are conceptual. So like you say a concept, then another concept, and another concept, and you just kind of put them together, and the situation makes it obvious. Whereas English, you're describing. So like you say this word, John did this, and then this happened, and then like it's like a string of descriptive words describing the situation. The things and people, whatever. Whereas Greek's more the endings of the words change depending on who you're speaking to, who's speaking. So there's can be 12 different variations of the same word. There's like this root word, and then it's really hard to learn actually because of that. And then, but it's similar to what we're talking about, because you're seeing the situation you're in differently. Like the English seems to make you more see it as a narrative going out places, where the Greek seems to be more like it's it's just weird. And I need to learn it properly to understand this a bit better, but it's not the same way of thinking. And I don't know if other languages are, I'm guessing other ones are even more different than that. But again, these are like in your body, like affects your movement. Because one thing that makes me laugh in Greek is that the words for left and right are long. And thank you. There are many syllables. So like, I've also, if you're in a chariot and a horse, you don't want three or four syllables to say left or right. 4 syllables for left, 3 syllables for right. Whereas in English, it's left and right, left, right. So you have to say
Spanish too. Is I think left and right is izquierda and derecha, which are not.
Here it's dexia, aristera, and dexia. Dexterity, it's right-handed, and it's like not practical. But the Anglo-Saxon words are short and practical single syllables, the same way as like most sheepdogs have a single syllable name, so the shepherd can shout the dog. Not all, but they often, so they can shout the dog quickly. These came out of the physical behaviors of those people for definite. Like the Anglo-Saxons, that's like Germanic tribes and steppe warriors and all that stuff. There's like more the Greek. I'm not sure what the situation is. The Mediterranean lifestyle, maybe it's not, things aren't as intense, and you have to move and organize yourself. Your movement is quickly, and then so it allowed them to spend time to have concepts that are more kind of concept and see how things connect. All this coming out of the physical behavior or the environment and stuff much more organically than I think people understand. Anyway, I find it interesting.
Yeah. I mean, we could probably have a whole other conversation about how different the language people use makes their.
We'll have to. Do you speak Spanish?
No, I know. Like I took it in high school and college, but I don't speak it.
We should get people on that have multiple languages, because it'd be interesting, and because it really is a central thing of dexterity, the language. Because like it's just built into you. And there's like a neuroscientist talks about metaphors a lot and stuff, and he's like talking about embodied metaphors. So like a lot of the languages is based on physical metaphors. Like you talk about prices rising and falling. It's because when you have more of stuff, you stack it up in bricks, and you've got more, and then it falls down, you have less. So more is higher. It doesn't, like it's like that's physical. Why you think it's more is higher? It's not it's not just a metaphor. It's like so there's loads of things like that in the way we speak, and some of them are like are in all languages, but not all of them are. So the way that they must think will just be differently. So like there's like tribes languages that they have words for 1, 2, 3, and then it's just many, because they don't need many as they don't that's just what they use, because whatever they're doing, that's all they need. I think they're like hunting in a jungle or something. I'm not sure. So I don't know why.
There's one over there. There's a pair over there. There's 3
and then must
be
many. Now it matters. Like it doesn't matter if it's too many to fight. Maybe 1, 2, and up to 3, 4. Oh, there's too many of them. Don't know. Yeah, it could be like something like that. That the birds that they hunt, say, you wouldn't get more than 3 without them being so many loads of them, or something like this. Who knows what it is. But again, that's just come out of their behavior. It's not like they didn't sit in a class and decide these things and then go, okay, let's use these new words. Oh, there's some birds. Let's throw the word at the bird. It'd be interesting to have somebody on who knows about that stuff.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind going more into depth or seeing what a more academic perspective might have on this type of stuff. Because again, like you mentioned about kids, like if you have some type of focus in education, maybe there's some insights into children's education that we're just not aware of that would be more suited to learning these things. So
yeah. The kind of the art, it's like an art really of knowing how to draw out of each person what stage they're at, rather than just pummel them in from the top. But it's also an art to know when they just need the structure made to do the structure, even though they think it's a waste of time, because later then they realize it's not as simple as no structure or all structure. It's way more complex if you want to get the best out of someone.
I mean, man, it feels like every time we talk, we come back to this concept of like, it's whatever we're looking to find here, it's always in the meaning between the things. It's never like the things itself. It's always the tension between the two, structure, unstructure. Like it's the back and forth between them. It's not the thing itself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you need you need tension. Yeah, but there's like good tension, bad tension.
Mm-hmm.
In everything really. You wouldn't do anything. You wouldn't go to bed if there's no tension. You know, you need a glass of water. That's tension. You need the toilet. That's tension. You you have a goal. It's tension. It's like, and that's like the mistake I made with the posture-related stuff for years. Was it was like I was doing techniques. It was all about releasing the tension and just hoping it all just does it by itself. So you can get a little bit of the way with that, because if you've got too much tension, if you've got excessive tension, once you get rid of the tension, it works a little bit better. So then you think that that's the solution all the way. So then you do more, and then you just end up kind of floppy and flaccid because you don't have the right tensions. I'm exaggerating, but a lot of the people really do end up floppy and flaccid. And so this, again, it comes about the intelligent, using the intelligent in the way that the attention in the way to create something rather than just pointless tension. And that's the same everywhere. It's like picking up a chick is verbal tension, like emotional tension and stuff. It's the same thing. If there's no tension, there's nothing. It's the same principles are everywhere. It's like, it's way like, we're obviously talking about how things are more complex and stuff, but in one way, life is pretty simple. It's all the same principle everywhere. It's just not easy, necessarily. But like, it's the same thing you see all the time. You just see it's just in different spheres. You see the same. You see dexterity everywhere once you notice it. Or at least they imagine it everywhere. Maybe it's not actually there. Who knows?
Yeah, I sometimes question that. I'm thinking about it now, so I'm applying it everywhere. Like everything gets.
I think like concepts and theories that are just like they're like dictators. They're like totalitarians. As soon as they work in one place, they just want to take over everywhere. They just want to apply everywhere. You have to, at some point, you start thinking this rule applies everywhere, and you see it everywhere, and then each person has their thing, and they drill it down, and they'll learn a ton of stuff for everybody else, but they always take it too far. So, and I'm going to take things too far as well. But you have to be a little kind of mad like a mad for something, obsessive on something to get everything, squeeze everything out of it. But then you have to have the dexterity to go, okay, it's too far now.
Bring it in a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, so cool.
All right, man. Good talk. I enjoyed this one. This one was fun. Not that I didn't enjoy the other ones too, but I like this one.
This is good. This is really like a open-ended one. It's like I don't feel like we got anywhere near exhausting the topic, but not in a bad way. It wasn't like it's like it just felt like it opened out more, and there's so many more things to go down with that. It's like interesting, and
it's a very big untapped field, or not tapped in the right way. So it's for us two guys who are kind of like, lack of a better term, like outsiders to it. There's so much terrain.
I've been calling us in-betweeners in my head. In-betweeners. So we're between the two things. So like Yeah, I mean, usually I'd always say to people, I'm not a spiritual type of guy. I'm not a gym bro. But now I tend to say more, I'm not a philosopher and I'm not a movement. Can't remember the word I was using recently. But to try and say, like, to always placing myself in between, so that I have an out when I say something that doesn't make sense, that they know more about, and I sound like I've said something stupid because I have this way of looking at it, and then you just find yourself saying things to someone, and they're like, "What?" Doesn't make sense to them because they haven't had all these conversations, and so I always leave myself an out, that I'm not like claiming to be an expert, So, but I think it's actually useful for people not to be an expert, and I think that's probably what that guy's thinking as well. The academic guy, that these guys will have something to say because we're not gym bros. Do this, like watch this. I'm going to jump over this, natural movement. I'm going to jump over this tree or whatever. We're not doing that kind of stuff. But we're also not just another academic. So, and I think academics in general, because they're so like fixed on this problem and research and whatever, they just want to put it out there. They want to talk about it. They don't want to have it restrained. Have it restricted. They're just like us. They just want to talk about what's interesting to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're trying to squeeze all the juice out, just like we are, but in a different setting.
Yeah, exactly. So what was that phrase earlier? Probabilistic soup. Yeah, great. I love that one.
Oh yeah. What do you think? You want to wrap up about
there?
there?
Well, I'm almost in the dark now, so yeah, I better do. Yeah. So for anyone listening, we have a series of these videos. You'll get a link to underneath, and if you are interested in this stuff, you can hit us up. Either speak to us on Twitter, or we have websites underneath if you want to work with us, and we'll take it from there.
Cool. Yeah. Dexterity, education, physical education. That's it.
Cool.
I thought I was trying to come up with something clever, but it didn't happen. So that's what you're left with.
Yeah. Fuck him.